good evening and welcome. Tonight we are going to be reading some articles out of History Magazine. And tonight, since it is spooky season, we're going to be reading about mummies. But not so much typical mummies. We're going to see some of the mummies in the other two articles I'm going to read you are very interesting, mysterious kind of mummies. But we're going to start out with the very typical, classic Egyptian mummies. This article is called Mystery Mummies in the Pharaoh's Tomb, the Eternal Companions of Amenhotep II. There he is. So let's start off by reading about this mummy history. But actually, before I do that, I should say that these articles about the mummies were chosen by my channel members. They were chosen by Dreadlock Kickboxer, Laura Taylor, and Krista Yilmaz. So thank you to my channel members. And if you would like to pick some History Magazine articles, you can click the join button down below or click the link in the video description. My channel memberships are only 99 US cents per month, the cheapest it can possibly be. And you get lots of fun little vlog style videos. You get lots of little extras during live streams and so much more. So, with that being said, let's get into the mummies. Mysteries in the Mummies Tomb. And we'll look at all the pictures after I read the article. They'll make more sense once you know the context. Royal tombs in the Valley of the Kings typically hold just one ruler. Built to house and protect Egyptian royalty on their journey through the afterlife, these chambers carved in the rocks near modern-day Luxor were intended for a single occupant. In 1881, a tomb near Deir el-Bahri in the Theban necropolis defied these assumptions. Rather than one royal mummy, a cache of mummies was discovered there. Among the dead, scholars identified no fewer than 11 pharaohs of ancient Egypt's splendid New Kingdom period, including Seti I, whose body was missing from his magnificent tomb, and Ramses the Great. Nicknamed the Royal Cache, this tomb, known to experts as TT320 or DB320, originally housed the bodies of the high priest of Amen and his family, who lived around 960 BCE. When Egyptologists documented the tomb's contents in 1881, more than 50 bodies were found there. Many of them, like Seti I and Ramses II, were kings and queens missing from the tombs that were built for them. Although the Deir el-Bahri discovery revealed the whereabouts of these missing royals, many more were still unaccounted for. Another impressive cache would be discovered in 1898, this time in the tomb of one of Egypt's greatest pharaohs, Amenhotep II. Here he is, by the way, Amenhotep II. The body on a boat. In 1897, Victor Loret was appointed the director of the Egyptian Antiquities Organization. The monocled Frenchman, an outstanding Egyptologist of his day, focused his energies on the nearby Valley of the Kings, the site of the subterranean tombs of many New Kingdom pharaohs. His efforts are soon rewarded. On February 12, 1898, Loret and his team discovered the tomb of Thutmose III, one of Egypt's greatest military kings, who conquered territory as far north as Syria in the mid-15th century BCE. Like so many other royal tombs, it had been looted in antiquity. Nevertheless, some of the warrior pharaoh's grave goods remained. Less than a month later, on March 9th, those digging with Loray sighted the entrance to another tomb located at the foot of the Cirque Formation that surrounds the Valley of the Kings. Accompanied by a ray, the local foreman, Loray lit candles and entered. In the flickering gloom, he and the ray found a small figurine among the rubble, an Ushabti inscribed with the name of King Amenhotep II, son of Thutmose III. It was a tantalizing clue, but not definitive proof of the tomb owner's identity. The entrance and the sloping passageways bored into the mountain until reaching a well, which had clearly once been filled with magnificent grave goods. Only broken remnants were left. It was obvious that this tomb, too, had been ransacked in ancient times, and Loray, disappointed, assumed that little or nothing of interest would be found. Venturing deeper into the complex, Loray and the ray found themselves in a rectangular room supported by two pillars. In the dim light of the candles, they could make out the shape of a funerary boat. Loray was then greeted by a horrible sight. He wrote, "A body lay there upon the boat, all black and hideous, its grimacing face turning towards me and looking at me, its long brown hair in sparse bunches around its head." Thieves had stripped it of its bandages and any accoutrement, leaving it bare but otherwise intact on the boat. At the end of this room was a staircase that the two men cautiously descended. They found themselves in a short passageway that led to a vestibule. Another passageway extended beyond it to a large room with 6 pillars. Faint colored murals decorated the walls on either side. The two men found and identified, with growing excitement, Amenhotep II's name on the walls. Here then was another piece of evidence that this place was the likely resting place of one of the new kingdom's most powerful rulers and builders. Crunching their way over broken objects, wood, pottery, and alabaster, Loray and the ray entered a sunken area of the room, where they found a large stone sarcophagus with its lid missing. Inside was a closed coffin with a crown of dry leaves placed at the feet and flowers at the head. Given the mess the thieves had made of the tomb, was it possible that they'd left what until then no Egyptologist had managed to find, the intact mummy of a pharaoh still lying in its sarcophagus? Loray continued his exploration of the tomb. A surprising find was 3 mummified bodies in one of the adjoining chambers. Closer inspection revealed their bandages had been torn away by looters, exposing bodies and faces. The tomb, however, had more surprises in store. The doorway of another adjoining chamber had been blocked with large stones. Loray lifted his candle to peer through the cracks. And by its dim light made out 9 more coffins, 5 of them still covered with their lids. Royal remains. The newly discovered tomb, later designated as Tomb KV35, had outstripped all expectations. Loray later returned to begin the process of excavation and evacuation of its contents. Cotton-lined boxes were brought in to carry away the multiple mummies. Moving aside the stones obstructing the side chamber, Loray then began to investigate the 9 bodies inside. After brushing away the thick layer of dust that covered the lid of the nearest coffin, Lorraine read with astonishment the royal protocol with the name of Ramses IV. Working his way from coffin to coffin, he revealed the names of Thutmose IV, Amenhotep III, Merneptah, Seti II, Siptah, Ramses V, and Ramses VI. The ninth belonged to a woman whose identity remains uncertain. As with the royal cache found at Deir el-Bahri 16 years earlier, the Frenchman had hit on a group of relocated mummies that included some of the most powerful and celebrated pharaohs of the New Kingdom. But if this tomb had become a secret resting place for this band of royal mummies, could Amenhotep II's body still be here? The answer would be found in the sarcophagus in the lower level of the burial chamber. Lorraine had not disturbed its contents when he first encountered the coffin, but he was prepared to examine it more thoroughly now. Lorraine removed the crown of leaves from the foot of the coffin and saw with horror that it had been covering a hole in the wood. Was it possible that, despite everything, the thieves had in fact removed the mummy? Lorraine reached into the hole, but his fingers met empty space. Tense moments followed as he and his colleagues eased off the coffin's lid. There, before him, was an intact mummy. The coffin was significantly longer than the body inside it, explaining why Lorraine's hand, and perhaps that of an earlier looter, felt nothing at the foot end. This body would be identified as Amenhotep II, who died circa 1400 BCE after ruling Egypt for nearly 3 decades. Together with the mummies found in the Deir el-Bahri cache 16 years earlier, the bodies found at KV-35 accounted for nearly all the 18th dynasty pharaohs, as well as several from the 19th and 20th dynasties. The latter dynasty concluded with the reign of Ramses XI around 1077 BCE. The practice of using pre-existing tombs to safeguard older royal mummies began during a period of decline in the 21st century. Egyptologists noted that tombs where the pharaohs had originally rested were being looted then. In an attempt to protect their ancestors, the priests of the 21st dynasty repurposed the Deir el-Bahri tomb, which had been built for a high priest. When the cache at Deir el-Bahri reached capacity, KV-35 then became the next one. Their choice was evidently a good one. Egypt's mightiest kings slumbered there undisturbed until Lorraine entered with his candle in 1898. Most of the KV-35 mummies were removed from the tomb and taken to the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, but Amenhotep II's body remained in situ. In 1901, thieves broke into the tomb. They damaged the funerary barge, smashed the mummy resting on it, and stole the body of Amenhotep II. Howard Carter, the Egyptologist who would later discover King Tut's tomb, tracked down the culprits and recovered the pharaoh's mummy, which had been damaged during the robbery. It was returned to the sarcophagus. Only in 1931 was Amenhotep II, whose descendants would include Akhenaten and his likely son Tutankhamun, whose tomb would be discovered in 1922, taken to Cairo. Family trees. While the names of many of KV-35's occupants are known, there are 3 mummies, 2 women and 1 young man, whose identities are the subject of great debate. The young man with the braid is widely believed to be a prince, but experts disagree on which one. Some think he is Amenhotep II's son, Prince Weben Senu. while others argue that he is Tutmos, the eldest son of King Amenhotep III. Initially, Loré had assumed the mummy lying on the boat in the pillared chamber was Prince Senu, but to the frustration of Egyptologists, the destruction of the body in the 1901 burglary makes an ironclad identification unlikely. One of the female mummies was first identified as male by Loré because of its shaved head, only later confirmed as being female. Now she is commonly known as the Younger Lady. British Egyptologist Joanne Fletcher suggested in 2003 that she was Nefertiti, but in 2010, DNA testing showed that the Younger Lady is King Tutankhamun's mother, whose name is still unknown. The third mummy, known as the Elder Lady, has long flowing hair, a useful clue in determining her identity. A lock of hair was found in the tomb of Tutankhamun, in small nested coffins bearing the name of Tut's likely grandmother, Queen Tiye, the great royal wife of Amenhotep III. Analysis found that the hair sample from the Elder Lady matches the hair in Tut's tomb, and in 2010, DNA testing confirmed the results, restoring Queen Tiye's name to her mummy, which now rests in the National Museum of Egyptian Civilization. Howard Carter's 1922 discovery of the intact tomb of Tutankhamun is often hailed as the greatest of all Egyptian discoveries, but the complex interlocking family relationships between the boy king and his ancestors was better understood thanks to the huge amount of information revealed by Loré's find at KV35 and the discovery of Deir el-Bahri. Taken together, the successive discoveries in Egypt in the late 1800s and early 1900s helped flesh out the lives and relationships of the powerful royal protagonists of that distant time. Alright, I'm going to show you the next page, but I will warn you that there are actual photographs of real mummies on that page, so if seeing old decayed bodies disturbs you, you might want to turn off your screen or look away for a moment. I will tell you once they are gone. So here we can see the mystery mummies. You can see the long hair here of the Elder Lady, Tut's grandmother. This is the prince that they can't identify, and this is the Younger Lady. Don't know who they are, but very mysterious and fascinating. Possibly Tut's mother, right? Possibly Prince Senu, that was his name. Anyway, I'm going to turn the page so they are now gone, and now it's just old photographs of mummies. You can see this is Amenhotep II's sarcophagus, which you can see that his body is way smaller than the tomb, so the thieves bashed in a hole here, couldn't feel anything, and just left his body intact. I wonder if they did that on purpose, you know. Depiction there of them excavating the Valley of the Kings. A little diagram here of the chamber that they went down. I think this is where the boat was. Or no, this is where the boat was. And then here's where they found all the mummies. And one of the big pillars in that big chamber where Amenhotep lied. And there's the Shabti there. Then here we can see the entrance to the tomb KV35, and there's Victor Loré, who found the tomb. Alright. Let's see, this last photo here shows where Amenhotep II's tomb was. You can see the big pillars here. Very cool. Alright, moving on to our next article. This one is another mystery. The message in the mummy's wrappings. Let's read it. In 1868, the Museum of Zagreb in Croatia, then part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, acquired an Egyptian mummy of a woman. Her previous owner had removed her wrappings but held on to them. She had been an ordinary person, not royalty or of the priestly class. Her wrappings, however, held a fascinating puzzle. There was writing on the linen strips, but German Egyptologist Heinrich Breuch noted that they were not Egyptian hieroglyphs. It was a script unknown to him. 2 decades later, in 1891, museum authorities agreed to send the wrappings to Vienna to see if they could translate the markings. The bandages were examined by the Austrian Egyptologist Jakob Kroll, I'm just going to say Jacob Kroll, who was able to finally break the code. The letters were not Coptic, as some had speculated, but Etruscan, the words of a culture that had dominated pre-Roman Italy. Whoever had wrapped the mummy centuries before had used strips torn from an Etruscan linen book. The discovery was sensational. References to Etruscan linen books can be found in many classical works, but surviving specimens had been impossible to find. The arid climate of Egypt, coupled with the desiccants used to dry out the mummy, had created a perfect environment to preserve the fragile textile. The mummy's wrappings were not only the first linen Etruscan text found intact, but also the longest text ever found in Etruscan. It could be a gold mine of information on the culture. Kroll's identification of the linen book of Zagreb, also known by its Latin name, Liber Lincius Zagrabiensis, raised many questions about its contents and when it was written. Of equal interest was how an Etruscan book came to wrap an Egyptian mummy. Etruscan enigmas. The modern Italian region of Tuscany corresponds roughly with the ancient Etruscan homeland of Etruria. Emerging in the 8th century BCE, Etruria traded with Greek colonists and developed a sophisticated culture of metalworking, painting, and carving. Trade brought Etruria goods, Greek gods, and the Euboean Greek alphabet. The Etruscans adapted it to create their own script, which was written from right to left. The Etruscan language is almost unique among European languages. Nearly all of them, including English, are derived from the Indo-European tongues that arrived in Europe thousands of years ago. Etruscan, however, is an outlier, a rare case of a language that predated and survived the Indo-European influx. Early Roman history is intertwined with that of Etruscans, who served as the city's earliest kings. Etruscan words found their way into Latin. Fursu, the Etruscan word for mask, is the root word for persona and person. Oh, that's persu. Persu, the word for persona and person. The growth of Republican Rome's power, however, would consume Etruscan society, leaving just its artifacts, vivid tomb art, and inscriptions that fewer and fewer people could read. The 1st century Roman Emperor Claudius was a student of Etruscan and one of the last people in classical antiquity able to speak and read it. Claudius even wrote a 20-volume history of the Etruscans, a work that has not survived to the modern age. Before being torn into bandages, the linen book of Zagreb was a sheet about 11 feet long covered with 12 columns of text. The part recovered from the bandages is thought to correspond to about 1,330 words, about 60% of the original text. Prior to the linen book's discovery, Etruscan experts had only been able to study the ancient language based on some 10,000 short inscriptions, but Krall's identification of the linen book's language in 1891 greatly increased the amount of available text. At first, scholars believed the linen book was a funerary work, which led to speculation that it was somehow linked to the body it once wrapped. The mummy had been purchased in the 1840s in Alexandria by a Croatian man named Mikhail Barch. He kept the mummy in his Vienna home. Weirdo. After his death, the mummy and its wrappings were donated to the museum in Zagreb. The Etruscan linen book was not the only text that formed part of the mummy's wrappings. A papyrus of the Egyptian Book of the Dead was also used to wrap the body. This Egyptian work references a female figure named Nessie Khons, the mistress of the house, whom scholars now believe to be the woman whose body was mummified. In the late 20th century, it was established that she lived sometime between the 4th and the 1st centuries BCE and died in her 30s. The linen book's black ink was made from burnt ivory with titles and rubrics in red written in cinnabar, a scarlet ore used in pigments. The Etruscan text was obscured in many places by the balsam used in the mummification process, but in the 1930s, advances in infrared photography allowed 90 more lines of the Etruscan to be deciphered, further clarifying what scholars believed the book's role had been: a ritual calendar detailing rites enacted throughout the year. The instructions in the Etruscan book center on when certain gods should be worshipped and what rites, such as ritual libation or animal sacrifice, should be performed. Among the specific deities mentioned is Nethuns, an Etruscan water god, a figure closely related to the Roman sea god Neptune. The text also references Usil, the Etruscan sun god, similar to Helios, the Greek solar god. Further study identified words and names that pinpoint the place of its composition. Etruscan experts believe the linen book was made near the modern-day Italian city of Perugia. While the linen itself has been dated to the 4th century BCE, textual clues place the writing to much later. The inclusion of the months of January as the start of the ritual year is the strongest indicator that the text was written sometime between 200 and 150 BCE. If this later dating of the text is correct, it opens a window into a way of life that was soon to be swept away by the expansion of Roman power. A ritual annual. Scholars still don't know exactly how this Etruscan text ended up in Egypt. Several hypotheses have been put forward. One is that the city of Alexandria, where the mummy was purchased in the 19th century, was the focus of international trade between the 4th and the 1st centuries BCE. In a cosmopolitan port city, texts from other cultures would not have been a rarity. Her body was simply mummified with the material available at the time. According to this theory, there is no special link between the book itself and the beliefs of the dead woman. The mummifiers just used what was around. Another theory takes a radically different view, pointing to Etruscan statuary that depicts linen books being placed in tombs, much as Egyptians placed the Book of the Dead in theirs. If the dead woman was of Etruscan ancestry, her relatives might have buried her according to the customs of both her adoptive and ancestral cultures, using both the Egyptian Book of the Dead and the Etruscan linen text. There's some Etruscan art up here. And then here's a vessel from Etruscan times. And there's some lines here from the Etruscan text, like, on August 13th, conduct the consecration according to the rite. Keep or guard the doors open then for the consecration. On September 24th, sacrificial victims for Nethuns are to be presented. Just a list of rituals. Isn't that interesting? This last article is not so much about mummies, but about a tomb, the Kazanlak tomb, frescoes of a faded kingdom. Let's see. Fighting during World War II led to surprising discoveries near the Bulgarian city of Kazanlak. Bulgaria had sided with Nazi Germany, and toward the end of the war, the country was bombed by the Allies from the west, while the threat of Soviet invasion loomed in the east. To protect their lands, the Bulgarian army built anti-aircraft defenses near the central city of Kazanlak. These works set off a remarkable series of archaeological discoveries that would hugely expand knowledge about the ancient peoples who lived in the region thousands of years before World War II. Their kingdom was called Thrace. Horses and gold. Ancient Thrace extended over what today is Bulgaria, northwest Turkey, southern Romania, and southeast Serbia. Not unlike 1940s Bulgaria, Thrace sat at a geopolitical crossroads, surrounded by great rival powers, Persia, Athens, and later Macedonia, neighbors with whom Thracian kingdoms formed a series of shifting alliances. Much of what is known about Thrace comes from Greek sources written by settlers living along the Black Sea coast that fringed Thrace, who admired and feared these wild-seeming people of the rugged interior. They were portrayed by Homer as allies of the Trojans in the Iliad and the Odyssey, warrior aristocrats who flaunted their gold and fine horses. Thracian culture bears the marks of both Eastern and Western influences. Their elite drinking vessels, made of precious metals, were inspired by both Persian and Greek styles and motifs. Greeks considered the Thracians barbarians, yet Greek contacts led them to associate their gods with Apollo and Hermes. Greek writings on the Thracians often noted their warlike nature and, with relief, their disunity. They would be the most powerful people in the world if they had one ruler, wrote Greek historian Herodotus. But such union is impossible for them, and there are no means of ever bringing it about. Nevertheless, in 479 BCE, the Persian retreat after their defeat by the Greeks created a power vacuum in Thrace and a chance for unity. The Thracian Teres I emerged as the founder king of what became known as the Odrysian kingdom, under which 40 Thracian tribes united. Although Odrysia was conquered by Alexander the Great's father Philip in 342 to 340 BCE, Odrysian co-rulers retained a degree of independence. There were tensions with Macedonia, but a flowering of Odrysian monument building did emerge under King Seuthes III. His power base was centered where Kazanlak in Bulgaria now stands, and where, in 1944, Bulgarian soldiers found the first of many ancient Thracian tombs. Enigmatic paintings. The first of the big Thracian discoveries at Kazanlak came in April 1944. Digging trenches, soldiers stumbled on a tomb containing richly colored frescoes. Archaeologists would later learn that this place, the tomb of Kazanlak, was not a standalone monument. It belonged to a royal necropolis that stretched across the landscape for miles around. Look at the pictures after. For miles around a lost Thracian city from the 4th century BCE. Archaeologists led by Dimitar P. Dimitrov, the director of the Archaeological Museum in Sofia, were able to begin a scientific investigation of the site in 1948. The Thracian tomb of Kazanlak consists of an antechamber, a connecting passageway, and a round burial chamber, all richly decorated. Although looted in the past, the wall decorations are well preserved. The walls of the entrance passageway are completely covered with colorful frescoes. Both the plinth, painted black, and the white listel, which marks the line from which the roof rises, give the illusion of stone slabs. Above these moldings is the frieze, with stylized plant motifs. There are 2 battle scenes on the frieze in which infantry and cavalry face one another, dressed in Thracian and Macedonian styles. Ignore my kitten crying at my feet. Okay. He's okay. The burial chamber itself is a beehive-shaped tholos. Inside it, archaeologists found fragments of a crown, an amphora, and, more important, the bones of 2 people, a man and a woman, who were verified as having lived at the beginning of the 3rd century BCE. Many believe the male remains are those of Prince Roygos, son of Seuthes III, and that the female bones belong to his wife. The burial chamber contains the tomb's most celebrated image, a portrait of a couple seated at a banquet table. They lovingly hold one another's wrists at the feast, surrounded by servants, musicians, and a chariot, and a little kitten. Hey, kitty. Thank you. Okay, can you move just a little bit so I can turn the page? Okay. So you can see this artwork here. So here's what it looks like if you were standing and looking up. And here's a cool little diagram of all of it. You can see here's the couple and the soldiers up here. The entrance, and this is what the tomb would look like if you entered it. Oh, you can't really see because now there's a cat. If you entered the tomb here. Alright, so that's going to be it for tonight. Thank you so much for watching. I'm gonna go play with this cat. He's ready to play. I hope that you found this video relaxing and educational. And I hope that you have a good night. Ouch.